Thank you to everyone who's here tonight, and a special thank you to everyone who's been here the last 4 lectures. It's a bittersweet end to our Wellness RX series, but this is just, I think, the beginning of many more projects to come. Again, thank you to Surge Kuwait, who have kind of adopted my idea and kind of supported me in every way. Tonight's a special night. We're talking to 2 special guests here tonight, Dr. Dana Tarah and Mariam Al-Hamid. Dr. Dana Tarah is an associate professor at Kuwait University, namely the Faculty of Public Health. She's a registered clinical nutritionist and has gained clinical experience both in the UK and in Kuwait. She specializes in weight management and development of nutrition education programs to prevent and manage obesity, starting from early childhood. Our second guest tonight is Mariam Al-Hamid, who is also a clinical dietitian with 10 plus years of experience working at the Ministry of Health here in Kuwait. She's worked in a variety of medical specialties, but mostly focusing on type 1 and type 2 diabetes nutrition therapy. She currently is a part of the teaching supporting staff at the Faculty of Public Health at the Kuwait University. Her nutrition interests are in diabetes therapy, pre and post bariatric surgery care in adolescents, and adult weight management. Dana and Mariam are in the process of launching Renourish Nutrition Consultancy, where they hope to use their varied clinical nutrition experience in enriching people's nutrition knowledge and helping corporate and healthcare workers adopt a healthier lifestyle. Thank you both for being here tonight. And this lecture will be split into 2. Dr. Dana will kick off this talk, and then Mariam will follow, inshallah. Thank you, and Dana, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Osama, and thank you, Surge Kuwait, for having us. It's really been a pleasure to be part of it, and hopefully, like you said, it's going to be a bittersweet ending, or a sweet ending to this series. So hopefully this talk is going to give you an overview on how you can eat well in everyday life. I'm going to be covering the whys, so why you should actually eat well, and Mariam's going to do more of the practical tips on how you can eat well every day. So how can okay, technical issues. So before I go into why you should eat well, one of the things I really like to give people is a timeline of nutrition research and how we've come to this modern nutrition science that we see today. So it all started like around the 1930s when vitamin discovery was kind of coming up, and the first vitamin was identified and discovered by a surgeon that gave British sailors or lemon, to treat scurvy. Since they were showing signs of deficiency. At the same time, there was so many reductionist approach in terms of nutrients treating a specific deficiency. And during these times, a lot of deficiencies were treated, like beriberi for B1 deficiency, thiamine. You had rickets for vitamin D deficiency. And during this time, it was also when the recommended dietary allowances were discovered during the times of food shortages around the Great Depression and World War II. Later on, around the 1960s, it's when food was considered a delivery system, and it was more in terms of fortification of foods that we have today, where we have bread that's been fortified with iron or salt fortified with iodine. There was also ongoing battles in terms of the rise in chronic disease and what was really causing it through the diet. Some were team fat and others were sugar. And at the time, fat was considered to be the enemy. And a lot of policies were changed in order to kind of promote a low-fat diet. And the industry, in turn, started producing products that were low fat and reduced fat or fat free that we see today. However, what was interesting is like how the reductionist approach was during the vitamin discovery, that one nutrient or food would treat a deficiency. It was thought that looking at a macronutrient like fat would be the main factor. However, through extensive research, they realized that it could be other factors like sugar or protein or calorie intake. This was more at the developed world. And then in the developing world, there was another battle between calories and protein in terms of helping those children in malnutrition. And it was also the time that food started to be fortified, like providing protein in formula and baby food. Around the 1980s, there was a rise in chronic diseases, and policies kind of focused on providing dietary guidelines to promote having a diet that's low in saturated fat, higher in fiber, things that we're very familiar with today. And there's more action on hunger through supplementation and fortification of food. Around the 2000, there was kind of a shift from that reductionist approach that I mentioned, and it was more focused on dietary patterns, looking at a multidimensional nature of the diet. During this time, it was also when we can see a double burden where some developing countries were having more undernutrition as well as the rise of non-communicable diseases. So where do we see nutrition research in the future? It's really trying to understand what's the optimal dietary composition for better health. A lot of research is being done to look at the role of probiotics and prebiotics on the gut microbiome. We've got a lot of work done on personalized nutrition and the role of fatty acids and flavonoids. But it's really looking at more of quality of the diet rather than quantifying it. What most importantly, it's taking the science that we've kind of collated throughout the years and translating them into policies for public health change in order to promote a healthier lifestyle. So this kind of transitions us to why you should eat well. And it's quite a question that, if I say, why would you want to eat well? Or you hear someone say, I want to eat well because it's usually because people want to manage their weight, whether it's weight loss majorly, or sometimes people do want to gain weight. But eating well, it's not only about weight management, it's just the tip of the iceberg. And there are many other reasons and incentives that people should eat well for. And it's energy, it's for immune support. Studies have shown that healthier diets prevent cancers, help with growth and development. And us ourselves, if you've kind of realized once you eat on a bad meal or continuously eat bad meals or unhealthily, you don't really feel well, you don't sleep well. And ultimately, just having a well-rounded diet does help you, live a better life and have a higher quality lifestyle. But if we think about why we eat, there are many factors that influence why we make our dietary choices, why we choose to eat a specific food. And it is multifactorial. There are many factors that do influence your dietary choices, some that you may not be aware of. These include social factors. So eating is a social occasion. We usually sit with people, eat it, and enjoy. And sometimes our choices are determined by our social peers. Other factors like biological, so you eat when you're hungry because of hormones like ghrelin increasing in your body. So your innate hunger and satiety kind of come in. And the palatability and taste of food also influence your dietary choices. If you're craving something sweet, you're likely to go for ice cream or or an apple if you're healthy. Then there's accessibility and availability, and that kind of influences what you choose. So if you've got a lot of accessibility to energy dense foods at home, your likelihood to choose them is going to be higher. And this also applies to people that can't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So that adversely affects the quality of their diet. A lot of studies have looked at educational levels. So people that don't have a lot of nutrition education aren't able to kind of differentiate on what's healthy and what's not. And then a lot of work has been done to say that even if you do give people education, it's not only about giving them the knowledge, but it's also the skills for them to apply it. So cooking skills and knowing how to kind of apply all the knowledge you have. Cost and economic factors. We know that lower social classes tend to have unhealthier diets due to their limited accessibility to healthy food. There's psychological factors like stress and mood. A lot of studies have looked at effects of depression and how there's a parallel rise with obesity, and then guilt with eating disorders that are quite prevalent right now. And then we've got attitudes and in terms of knowledge and beliefs and our choices of the foods that we eat. Sorry, there's a fly with me, so if you see me. So in terms of our attitudes, our beliefs, even with religion, our dietary choices are kind of primed, and we kind of grow up with them. So as you can see, there's so many factors that determine our dietary choices, and it's really difficult to pinpoint one factor that influences your dietary choice. So next time you make a food choice, try to think about why you're actually doing it. It's quite interesting if you do it for yourself. So like I said, the human diet is complex, and free living people don't really eat food in isolation. We eat foods in combination. You don't really eat just tomatoes or just chicken. You eat a chicken with potatoes and maybe a salad. So there's a lot of nutrients. That brings us to what are the components of a healthy diet, and it's really just a distribution and appropriate proportions of macronutrients like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and water for hydration. So having a varied, wholesome, and balanced diet provides you with provides your body with physiological and energetic needs, provides you with micronutrients that you need. And it's also important to avoid excessive or limit your excessive intake of processed food, to have them in moderation whenever you crave, but it's really important not to have the excess amount. A lot of research has been done in terms of identifying what a healthy diet is, and some of them have been developed through design, like the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and the MIND, which is kind of a combination of the Mediterranean, which is more of a traditional healthy diet, and the DASH, and it's more for brain health. And what they come in line with what the WHO recommends of having more plant-based proteins, having whole grains, fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of similarities, as you can see here, between these diets in terms of having nuts and legumes, like larger serving sizes compared to animal-based proteins. And also all these kind of tell you that you can have sweets, but in moderation or on weekends or infrequent. But the thing is, it's all about incorporating all these food groups. And Maryam, hopefully, the next part of this talk is going to provide you with more details on how you can kind of pick and choose different foods to build meals. Like I mentioned from the nutrition research timeline, there has been a shift towards dietary patterns, and this is because, like I said, it's difficult to interpret correlations that exist between nutrients, and so there's kind of been a shift to look at the diet in a multidimensional nature, look at it collectively instead of individually. And especially when looking at relationships with disease risk. A lot of this work is done through, it's beyond the scope of the talk, but it's through a data-driven dietary analysis. So we collect the data, dietary data from participants, and then through factor analysis, we're able to derive the dietary patterns that score high. So usually 2 dietary patterns are often found, and one's more like a health conscious dietary pattern, and one's processed or unhealthy. The healthy, as you can imagine, is higher in fruits and vegetables, higher in fiber, lower in processed food, and sometimes animal-based proteins. And then the process is more of the convenience foods, the fried food, and lower in fiber and fruits and vegetables. Dietary patterns have been derived for many countries around the world. In Kuwait, more recently, there's been a study that was done, and what it derived, as you can see here, is that there's a vegetable-rich pattern, a fast food pattern, and refined grains. And what they found is that adherence to those that scored high within a quartile, the highest quartile within that pattern, was positively associated with a higher BMI, waist circumference, blood pressure, and glucose levels, as well as higher adherence. They found that higher adherence with the refined grains, which would be expected, was associated for higher glucose levels. A lot of epidemiological studies have shown that dietary patterns are associated with health outcomes, and unhealthy dietary patterns are associated with adverse health outcomes. And this recent meta-analysis was done on 40 studies of moderate to high quality. And what they found is that those that adhered to a healthy dietary pattern had a lower risk of metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome, for those that aren't familiar, it includes a cluster of factors like high blood pressure, high blood sugar, abdominal obesity, high cholesterol, and I think that's it. And what they also found is that meat and Western patterns were associated with a higher risk. So it kind of gives you an indication that looking at dietary patterns is kind of more informative and provide us with more of a holistic understanding of diet and disease risk. So now that we kind of looked at the foods that you kind of need to consume, the other aspect is the size. So does size actually matter? And the answer is yes, it does, because portion sizes over the years have increased. I'm sure that many of you have realized that portion sizes have increased. You go to different countries, you can see differences in portion sizes. However, generally, we do realize that portion sizes have increased throughout the years. And the issue is that because the portion sizes are large, people have become normalized to these portion sizes and what we call today portion size distortion. And the more people are exposed to large portion sizes, the more they're likely to normalize them and then accept consuming that portion size. Such as studies have shown that those people that consume large portion sizes of energy-dense food is positively associated with BMI. And therefore, a lot of effort needs to be done in terms of educating the public on portion sizes, as well as reducing the serving sizes available on food packaging. But this brings us to one of the most interesting, and I think all of you kind of realized that there are many projects like the Thins, the Minis, the Bites, and it's really important for you as consumers to realize that it doesn't mean that it's because it's small that it's healthier, or that you're not really consuming the same amount. Because if you were to, for example, have the digestive Thins, have the whole packet, because they are very light in themselves, you are consuming the same amount of calories per 100 gram as the regular version. So it's just important for you to kind of keep it in mind when making choices, because these can be appealing for someone that is, for example, if they were watching their weight. It's also interesting that the amount of like unpackaged serving and the amount people actually consume is very different. The study was done in the UK, part of their national dietary survey. And what they found is that, especially for confectioneries, people consumed more than the on-serving package, especially for things like popcorn, nuts, coated nuts, fruits, pastries. And I think most of us, when we go for a handful of popcorn, we won't really go for 30 grams. We're likely to have more than 30 grams, or the packet if it's 30 grams. So it's important for us to kind of have the knowledge, and hopefully Miriam is going to be able to kind of give you a better understanding on how you can read food labels and how they may be useful in your everyday life. One other study that was very useful, very interesting for me as well, is that it looked at the influence of social norms and portion sizes. And what they found is that, what they did, sorry, is that they randomized 132 women to either receive, get a small portion of a lasagna, so it was 60% the normal size, or a large, which was 180% bigger than the normal. So these women were randomized to these two groups, and then they were asked to come in the next day. But on the next day, they weren't given the portion size, the same portion. They were given the family-sized version of the lasagna. And they were asked to serve themselves as much as they wanted. And what they found in the study is that those that were provided, offered a smaller portion on day one, served themselves and consumed a smaller portion on day two. So the study kind of concluded that a smaller portion size relative to larger changed these perceived social norms about portion sizes, and they may be useful in terms of, you know, public health efforts and educating the people and kind of reducing the consumption of food, since there is a great deal of overconsumption going on. And this brings us to one of the topics that a lot of people really like to talk about, and dietary plans, or fad diets, as they say, and are they effective? And the answer is, it's going to come up, but I just wanted to kind of take us through, you know, the history of diets. And as you can see here, the diets existed way, way long ago, and from 1918. You've got in the 1920s, you've got people promoting cigarette smoking to lose weight. You've got eating meat for every occasion. In the 1950s, women were having tapeworms to lose weight. And then there were some absurd diets like the pineapple diet and the ice cream diet, diets like the cabbage soup diet that your parents may have tried. And they kind of go on. And even in our modern day lives, these diets do exist. And you've got diets like, you know, the keto diet, the paleos, the South Beach. And the issue with all these diets is, I always say that if they were effective, why would we have rising prevalence rates of overweight and obesity? Because if those diets were actually working, why would people still gain weight? And why would it be a public health problem? So what I like to say is, if there was a take-home message and something for you to remember, is that it is really an energy balance. It's about calorie in and calorie out. And irrespective of the macronutrient composition of your food, it's really about that balance. If you consume more calories than you expend through exercise, you're likely to gain weight. And if you expend more than you eat, then you're going to lose weight. It's really as simple as that. And I think it's very difficult for people to kind of let that sink in and understand it. And we tend to see that people kind of hear that someone's tried a diet, a named diet that promotes no carbohydrates, and they've lost weight. And the reason for that is that protein in itself is very satiating. So people can't really eat a lot of protein-based food compared to having like palatable carbohydrates. So they are likely to lose weight. And what studies have kind of shown is that when you compare like low-fat diets with a low-carbohydrate diet, in a randomized controlled trial, yes, weight loss is achieved on both types of diets. But what's interesting is by 12 months, there was no difference in terms of weight loss. Other diets have been done, and other like randomized controlled trials, reviews and meta-analyses. And all of these kind of come to the same conclusion that yes, weight loss is achieved through all these diets, but there is weight regain. And there is no perfect diet. It's really about finding a diet that you like, that is not adversely affecting your health in the long term, and you can adhere to in order to maintain weight loss. So that's really something that is important for you to kind of take home and you know, inform others as well. So another aspect, which is also a fundamental aspect of diet, is meal timing and frequency. And it brings us to something that you may be familiar with, which is more, the trend with intermittent fasting. Usually you can see here on the left, the regular meals is 3 regular meals and 2 snacks that go in across the whole day. And then you've got B, where there are 3 small meals or 2 small meals. And there's so many different types in terms of, time restricted or energy restricted studies. And there have been some research done in terms of their impact on health. However, it's still, in my opinion, it's an area of infancy, and there needs to be more research done, more conclusive evidence. However, if it does work for someone, then, if there's no harm, then they should stick to it. And this kind of brings us to the aspect of time. And the topic that is really relevant to what Osama wanted us to kind of focus on is nutrition at the workplace. And in terms of time, I know that during COVID, a lot of people are working from home, but in reality, what we do is we spend a lot of time at work. And maybe this talk is more focused on healthcare workers through Surge Kuwait. And a lot of energy is consumed during that. So 30% of your caloric intake could be consumed during that 60% of time that you spend. And if your diet isn't healthy or well balanced, your productivity is going to be affected. And your employer healthcare costs have been shown to be higher. Another area in terms of shift work, especially for healthcare workers, is chrononutrition, which describes the interaction between food and meal timing. And this can be in terms of the inconsistency, the frequency, or the clock time. And what studies have kind of shown is there are adverse effects of shift work on health. And this is because the disruption of the circadian rhythm, the sleep-wake cycle, and the increased risk of non-communicable diseases. So it's really important for people that go through shift work, whether it's in the healthcare or other professions, to really focus on their diet, because it does have an influence. So shift workers, here you can see the circadian rhythm misalignment can influence so many systems like the cardiovascular, the neurobiological, or the gastrointestinal and metabolic syndrome. So it's beyond the scope of this talk, but it's really important to know that if you are a shift worker, you should really focus on your diet, and Miriam will provide you with kind of some tips on how you can manage your diet in a better way. And this is because a lot of studies have shown that mainly in nurses, to be honest, it's a very understudied area, which needs a lot of work. And hopefully we can get some work done in Kuwait to see how, the nutritional status of healthcare workers is. But overall, what we see is, as expected, there's a high coffee intake, low fruit and vegetable, more consumption of low value and nutritious snacks, late last meal, and meal irregularity that can have effects in the long term. So what can we do? We can have wellness programs which have been proven to be useful. Workplace plays a key role in encouraging healthy foods choices. This can be done through physical activity, nutrition education, goal setting. And from the wellness programs that have been carried out, they have been shown to be useful. For example, this one that was done, they use strategies like facilitate healthy food at the work, provide exercise facilities, and through online nutrition education, especially being flexible, counseling if needed, they found that fruit and vegetable consumption increased. There was an overall improvement in diet quality, and the sale of healthy foods that was available within those institutions increased. So it's really important for any institution or workplace to kind of invest in their workers. Although during these times in COVID, I don't think a lot of people are going back to work, and it's not really that normal. But hopefully once we go back to that normal that we seek for, a lot of investments can be done in terms of the wellness of healthcare workers or workers in themselves. So before I transition to Maryam, I just wanted to kind of go, as I mentioned, COVID-19, to just mention anything about diet and COVID-19. I think a lot of you have kind of heard claims throughout the past 9 months, supplements to be taken, foods to be consumed. And there's a lot of miscommunication. And what I really want to mention is that there is no miracle supplement to boost immunity. There is no evidence of a specific supplement to boost the immunity. It's really important, especially with people recommending taking, your own supplements like vitamin D in large quantities or zinc in large quantities. It can adversely affect your health in terms of safety and toxicity. For example, if you take too much vitamin D and calcium, it can increase your risk of getting kidney stones. Supplements, don't take me wrong, are very useful, especially if you have a nutrient deficiency, or you're a high risk group like elderly that aren't able to have a varied diet, or pregnant women are always recommended to have prenatals. So what is important is that during these uncertain times that you focus on a wholesome diet, a well-balanced diet, get enough sleep, especially if you work long hours, and get moderate physical activity to ensure that your immune function is adequate. And hopefully, now Maryam hopefully will give you kind of some tips, and we're going to be able to know on how you can adapt all these practical tips in your everyday life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. That was a very informative talk. It's super interesting, and I think it's very vital for people to take care of themselves, especially the cohort we're discussing with tonight. Before we move on to Maryam's talk, we're going to have a poll and kind of see how much nutrition knowledge you guys know. So the poll will come up any second now. Can you please answer? So the question is, what does a low-fat food claim mean? So we've got 40 seconds for everyone to answer. We'll know the answers at the end following Maryam's talk. Just 10 more seconds. Okay. We'll stop now. We'll go on to the next question. So 41% answered the right answer, which is less than 2 grams of fat per 100 grams. Next question. Which of the following is a complete protein? Ten seconds. Perfect. Thank you. So the correct answer was lentils, and only 31% of you answered correctly. So now we move on to the next part of our lecture and kind of understand practical solutions to eating healthy at the workplace. Maryam, you can take over.
All right,
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. And thank you, Surge Kuwait, for having us. It's a great opportunity, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I just want to move this. Okay. So like Dana said, I'll be continuing today's lecture series by focusing on the more practical tips and the dietary habits that we should be following. We'll look into food labels, making healthier food swaps, and healthier choices in general to be able to plan our dietary intake in advance. Eating is something we do every day, but a lot of people eating well isn't a priority. We make many food choices a day, sometimes pre-planned and sometimes just on the spot. Things like what we want to eat, how much we're eating, where we're eating, what time of day it is, and who we're with are all factors that influence our food intake decisions. The fact that you're here today, I hope, means that you are either already on the track to improving your dietary habits or that you're planning to do so. And if you ask me what one of the most important things to do or to have when trying to change your dietary lifestyle, I would say it's to plan and pre-plan. One of the most important and maybe most neglected topics when it comes to dietary routine is the actual planning and the time management that someone has to put in to be able to change their dietary habits. Although it might seem like a very tedious task to do, it's actually very useful, especially when you're busy at work or when you're out and about and you don't know what you're going to eat next. It's very important to think about your lifestyle and pick a pattern or pick dietary habits that you can stick to and that will help you reach your goals. This can easily be done by maintaining or having a food diary. And that's something that we usually like to recommend as dietitians, especially at the beginning of a dietary change journey, is to try and see how your food intake looks like. You can list your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, all your snacks, and try to notice if there's a specific pattern that needs changing, if you have specific food cravings at a specific time of day, or for example, if you eat more when you're stressed at work. These little things are easily spotted when you actually have everything noted down in front of you. It's also important to know what food options are available for you when you're at work, for example. Don't leave things to the last minute. Try to know if you can take food with you to work, whether you have space for you to store it and to prepare it, or if you'll need to be ordering food from restaurants around you. We'll go a bit later into choosing from menus, but I'll leave that for that bit of the presentation. But overall, what the main point here is that it would be very helpful for someone to try and plan ahead. That way you would have a routine in place and you can start making healthy eating a habit. Usually when we ask people what their health goals are, we get a huge list of answers. And the thing is here is that you really should try to make it specific. When you have a health goal, try to achieve it by making it specific, to the point, something simple that you can keep up. So for example, if I wanted to increase my intake of fruits and vegetables, I could tell myself that I'll be having a fruit every day after I've had breakfast in, say, 2 to 3 hours. I can even set a reminder to help me. If I know I'll be at work, then I need to take it with me at work. If I know I'll be out running errands, then it needs to be with me. So having a plan usually helps me reach that goal. And usually within about 10 weeks, you would have accomplished it and can then move on to setting new goals and creating new habits. There's been many interventions that have been developed that looked into a habit formation theory, and specifically for weight control and weight management. A group at UCL tested a habit formation theory by working on an intervention that focused on the 10 top tips for weight loss. And what they found in the intervention group is that those that were assigned the 10 top tips lost more weight at 3 months than those that received conventional nutrition care, which is seeing a dietitian every 2 weeks. Later on, at 24 weeks, the results weren't that significant and the differences weren't observed as much. However, when trying to adopt a new lifestyle or a new habit, if keeping track of your progress, if knowing what you're doing on a daily basis helps you, then it wouldn't hurt to try and take note of, for example, your portion sizes, your food intake, how many steps you're taking a day, your specific meal routine to help you reach your goal. Usually people need that kickstart or that boost at the beginning to keep them going later on as well. So what should we be eating? Put simply, like Dana said, our diet should be balanced, it should be varied, and it should be focused on food quality over quantity. It needs to include nutrient-rich foods, and by that we mean more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, lean meat and plant proteins, and limiting saturated fat, salt, sugar, and highly processed foods. I think all of us at some point have heard that a calorie is a calorie, and as long as we consume less calories than we usually do, we'll end up losing weight. But in reality, there's been a lot of evidence that shows food quality also matters when it comes to weight maintenance and weight loss. So it's not just about how much we eat, but also about what we're eating. And try to choose higher quality foods while minimizing lower quality. I don't want to say avoiding it completely, but at least trying to minimize it as much as you can. And when you eat, be mindful, pay attention to what you're eating, avoid eating too fast. Remember, it takes us around 20 minutes for our body to address or to acknowledge that we're actually eating. So slow down, enjoy your food. Eat at a table, don't eat when you're rushed. If you're at work, try not to eat too quick between meetings. Schedule these things in advance and give yourself time to enjoy your meals and to pay attention to the food that you're eating. So like I said, high quality foods usually include the unrefined, minimally processed foods, and that these are the foods that we usually see on such images or such eating plates that I'm sure many of you have come across. They've changed through time, and what they mostly focus on, however, is that we should increase our intake of fruits and vegetables, and usually that accounts for around half of our plate, of our standard eating plate. And then the other half can be equally distributed between lean proteins and high quality carbohydrates or unrefined carbohydrates. To me, the eating plate is something very easy to follow. I would advise it for someone who needs to make changes to their diet but doesn't want to adhere to something very rigid. It's very easy to follow. It simply asks for you to pay attention to your plate and what goes on it. It's a quick and easy way for you to make sure that you're increasing your fiber intake as well, because by having more unrefined carbohydrates and more fruits and vegetables, you will automatically be increasing your fiber intake and hopefully reaching a goal of 25 to 30 grams of fiber a day. It's very important, I would say, to note that there isn't one diet that fits everyone, but this type of plate is something that can work for a lot of people. So it's something easy to follow and something that you can adhere to very, very quickly. With the increase in all the macronutrient diets, like Dana mentioned, the low fat, the high protein, the paleo, the Atkins, the keto, all of these diets, it goes without mentioning that no nutrition conversation these days happens without mentioning the three main macronutrient groups. And the thing is, there hasn't been, like Dana mentioned, there hasn't been much evidence that would support the benefits of one diet over another. So it's more advisable to try and include the three macronutrients in your meals on a regular basis. Try to switch them around, try to make your diet varied, and choose items from each group for every meal that you're having. Usually some fats are included while cooking, so you don't have to physically see them on your plate, but you know that they're there. in your meal as a whole. So if you have, 3 eating occasions, you can think of your 3 macronutrients going in your 3 eating occasions. In between your main meals, obviously, you'll want to have a snack. This helps you also avoid going hungry in between your meals. Be creative. Try to prepare them in advance. Sorry. Some examples would be, a handful of raw nuts, sliced apples with peanut butter or almond butter, some dark chocolate, baked kale chips, a cup of popcorn. You can get creative and make your own, date balls or smoothies and shakes. These are all options that would basically fill in the gap between your main meals and not get you very hungry when it's time for lunch or time for dinner. Something very important to mention with snacks, though, is that you should really try to limit your portion sizes and make sure that you're not exceeding the recommended intake. This table shows a sample meal plan. I wanted to put this in there to kind of show you what we usually try to advise. It shows 5 days of daily intake of your 3 main meals and your 2 snacks. You'll notice that some of the main meals are include plant-based proteins, and that's a good way for you to boost your fiber intake and to lower your intake of animal protein. If you're like me and you're not a fan of a big breakfast in the morning, you can start your day with a smoothie or a shake that includes fruits, leafy greens, and a source of protein like milk or yogurt. That'll give you a good kickstart until it's time for your snack, a few hours later. When it comes to specific meal plans, and if you have any specific goals, it's very advisable to work with a dietitian to try to reach them, because that's where portion sizes really matter. Even if you're eating very healthy, you still need to watch the amount you're eating. So it's, that's where the role of a dietitian, I think, comes in, and it would be good to work with someone closely to help you achieve those goals. There's a variety of ways or tools that a person can use to achieve their goals when it comes to healthier eating. And besides initially setting a plan, you need to also focus on the quality of foods that come into your home. So when grocery shopping, make sure that you, for example, shop the perimeter of the supermarket first. That's where all the fresh produce is. It's where all the lean meats, the fruits and vegetables, the dairy are usually stocked, and then avoid the center aisles. That's where all the highly processed, high sugar, high salt foods are usually available. Don't go to the supermarket hungry either. That's a bad sign. And read nutrition labels. I think that's a trick that helps a lot of people be able to choose the best ingredients from what's available. This is the basic and most common food label. I'm sure many of you have seen it, and I think depending on the label's format, it could be different depending on the region or the regulations, but they all give us the same pieces of information. People usually, when looking at the food label, quickly jump to look at the calories that are listed. In this example, for muesli, actually, it has 140 calories listed. But the first thing you should actually pay attention to is the servings and the serving size. So here you have listed a quarter cup, and it says that the pack or the box contains 32 servings. That's when you can then go ahead and look at the calories. If you were to in fact only have a quarter cup, which might be too little for some people, then you are sticking to 140 calories. But if, say, you have a half a cup, then you will automatically have to double the calories, obviously, which takes you to 280 calories. That would apply to all the macronutrients and the micronutrients listed at the bottom too. Generally speaking, we advise to limit your intake of foods that are higher in the fat listed, especially saturated and trans fat, the cholesterol, the sodium, and the total sugars listed. And then you should try to increase your intake of foods that are higher in dietary fiber and higher in protein, as well as the micronutrients listed below. I think when it comes to food labels, it's a good way to start, but it's also tricky, especially when you're comparing items from different brands. But it's also important to know which foods naturally are, for example, high in fat. So peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, all of these are great additions to your diet. But if you check the nutrition label, you will see that they have a high fat content. But in that situation, or in that example, that's actually a good choice. So it's not just about reading food labels, but it is a good way to start. You might have also seen such food claims on packages, fat-free, sugar-free, light or low fat, and these food claims on many food products are usually put there as a marketing scheme to attract consumers into purchasing these products. Generally speaking, you should know that, for example, fat-free or sugar-free claims mean that a product has less than 0.5 grams of sugar or fat per 100 gram serving, whereas a light or a reduced fat claim means that the product contains 30% fewer calories than the original product. So having a light food claim on a product doesn't automatically mean it's healthy. It could still be high in fat, but it's 30% lower than the original. So this terminology is there for a reason, but don't always fall victim to it. This is a good example of what I'm trying to illustrate. And if we look at these biscuits, you'll see the original version up top and then the lighter version at the bottom. And when you first take a look, you'll notice that there's actually fewer calories in the lighter version, as expected, per biscuit compared to the 71 calories in the original version. But if you take a closer look, you will see that the sugars are actually higher in the lighter version compared to the original. And the reason for that is that a lot of food manufacturers remove the fat in order to market the products as light, but then they add the sugar to make up for taste and texture. Many studies have further investigated this, and when comparing regular versions of dairy and baked goods to salad dressings, to their lighter and non-fat versions, almost always the fat content is lower, but the sugar content is higher. So that's something to think about or to consider when you're working on your goals, on your personal goals that you're trying to accomplish. This is another example of food labels. We'll be looking at quite a few right now. And in this example, you have a mango leban, and you will see that in the nutrition label, it lists 81 calories per 100 ml, when in fact, the item that you're buying doesn't come in a 100 ml sizing. It's either in, or a portion, it's either in a 180 ml or 340 ml. A lot of people assume that whatever is listed on the product is the amount of calories that they're consuming. But in this situation, for example, it's either 100, close to 150 or close to 280 calories that you would be consuming when purchasing this mango leban. Something else to look at in this example is the ingredients list. You'll see that the first ingredient on there is fresh cow's milk, and that's a good thing. But then the second one is actually sugar, which makes this product very high in sugar. If you ask me, I would say just make your own, mango smoothie at home, or, mix your fresh mangoes or frozen mangoes with your choice of leban or milk, and have it on the go for a much more sugar, a lighter sugar option without any added sugars, basically. In this food label, for example, it actually makes it harder for us to adhere to a portion size. That's where also food labels can be tricky. It lists 38 straws as a serving, and we definitely don't expect anyone to be counting the amount of crisps or chips that they're going to be having. In this situation, we usually just advise people to go for smaller packs when they're sold, instead of buying larger packets of chips and consuming larger portion sizes. When it comes to dairy, a lot of people go for lighter versions or non-fat, especially when it comes to yogurt. And this situation is the same as the one with the digestive biscuits, where you can see that the calories are definitely lower in the zero-fat version, but the sugar is actually higher. So it takes us back to the same situation where you really need to think about your goals and what you're trying to achieve, and which product works best for you. While looking at nutrition labels, I think it helps you learn how to choose foods and to know which items are healthier, and to make food swaps between different brands. But food swaps also work when you are trying to have different, a larger variety of foods. Some foods are best consumed in moderation, even if they're the better option when it comes to the nutrition label. So with those kinds of foods, you really want to swap out with a better option. When it comes to fruit juices, for example, I would definitely ask you or advise you to limit fruit juices and to instead have, naturally infused water or coconut water instead. If you were trying to maybe increase your intake of fiber or of vegetables, you can then, or even plant proteins, you can then, for example, swap out, a beef burger for a bean burger every now and then. Or you could have, cauliflower rice or cauliflower mash instead of potatoes or white rice. And these little food swaps can also help you when going out to restaurants and making decisions on what to pick from a menu. When eating out, I think portion sizes are really important. Make sure that what you're ordering is suitable for you. Look at the menu in advance. Try to know what you will be ordering when you're going to the restaurant and when you're ordering in. Generally speaking, you're looking to avoid fried foods, to choose grilled, broiled, or steamed foods. And if an item doesn't completely fit your goals, then don't hesitate to ask the restaurant to cater to your needs. Things like swapping a salad for fries, or fries for a salad, or having your dressing or your sauces on the side are all little ways that can help you improve your dietary intake without limiting yourself completely. In general as well, avoid ordering when you're hungry, or too hungry, so that you don't over order. Listen to your body, know how much you're eating, give yourself time to enjoy the food, and don't go for seconds unless you're sure that you're still hungry. Besides food, we all know that hydration is super important. In a nutshell, you want to be consuming at least 8 cups of fluids per day, mostly water, but then that could include other fluids as well. The most important point here, I guess, is to try and limit your intake of fruit juices and smoothies, sugary coffee, soft drinks. I think these kinds of drinks usually offer large amounts of calories without any nutritional value. And I think a lot of people don't realize that just 300 ml of a juice or a smoothie or a soft drink usually gets you to the 30 to 35 grams of sugar that is recommended, or not, right? That is suggested per day And how many people, do we know have, a juice for breakfast, a soft drink with dinner, and then sweetened coffee throughout the day? This takes us to coffee, something I think a lot of people have on a daily basis. And there's a huge variety of drinks that are labeled as coffee drinks, from an Americano to a flat white, to a caramel macchiato and a pumpkin spice latte. And there's a huge difference in the amount of sugar between these drinks. Especially, in the latter types, you can see that the sugar content is extremely high. Having these types of drinks at the beginning of your day or during work, especially if you work day shifts and night shifts as a healthcare professional, or in general, these kinds of drinks actually do not give you the energy boost that you are expecting. In fact, you will end up being more tired, lazier a few hours later than when you started. You're much better off trying to have the drinks that are on the left side of this slide rather than the ones on the right. We've all heard people ask for that extra pump of vanilla or extra pump of caramel when each pump is about a tablespoon of sugar. Like I said, when it comes to healthcare workers and to shift work or other professionals who have day and night shifts, eating habits can be difficult to adhere to, and might be changed or altered while you're at work. Being organized, I think, is really important when you're at work. Set yourself up for a successful day by trying to plan your meals in advance. Go grocery shopping if you need to. Do some meal prepping if you can, and regardless of the timing of the shift, try to eat the right meals at the right time. And what I mean by that is, for breakfast, have your breakfast foods. For lunch, have a lunch type of meal, and in the evening, have an early dinner. If you work a night shift, I would also advise to avoid the high carb, high sugar snacks. Instead, try to have a high protein snack every 3 hours until your shift is over. If you're having coffee throughout the night or throughout the day, try to avoid it for the 4 to 6 hours before your shift ends, so that you can get done with your shift, get some sleep, and start the next day energized and ready to go. As part of workplace wellness, I think it's also important for employers and institutions to focus on creating a supportive work environment and a culture where workers can enjoy their meal breaks, away from their desk areas. Give them the time to have a lunch break to enjoy their meals. Provide food storage and preparation facilities so people can stick to their dietary changes and to their dietary habits. Developing a healthy eating policy at work will definitely give employees the confidence that they need to continue on a healthier way of living. Just before I end, I think it's worth mentioning that there's been a rise in the availability and use of smartphone tools and smartwatches or applications that allow individuals to either record their dietary intake, their physical activity, their exercise habits, and sometimes even sleep patterns. We probably all know someone that has one of these apps, or we have them ourselves. But the question remains is, are these health apps and tools actually effective? And a lot of systematic reviews have been carried out to evaluate their effectiveness, focusing on children and on adults. And the evidence is very modest. App-based interventions might improve diet, physical activity, sedentary behavior, but it's usually always in the short term. This doesn't take away from the fact that if it works for you, we would still advise you to do it. Again, it goes back to creating habits and to try to make your journey towards healthy eating successful. think all in all, we can see that most dietary plans and dietary changes and, eating habits work because people adhere to them, they stick to them. And ultimately, the goal is to live a healthy and a balanced lifestyle. So whether you wish to, use a tool to count your steps or have an app that counts your macros, what's important is that you really try to avoid restrictive behaviors, enjoy your food, move often, and try to keep these habits up in the long term. I think we have to remember that we need to be flexible in our food choices and to avoid being stressed about eating well. I think people put too much stress on themselves towards what they should eat and can't eat. And I think as long as you're eating everything in moderation and you're trying your best to make dietary changes and to improve your dietary habits, then you're definitely on the right track. Just, keep in mind that you don't need a reason to eat the foods that you like. Flexibility in your food choices is something healthy. Eating a variety of foods is also healthy. Focusing and on enjoying your food is healthy, and not stressing about it is also healthy. Thank you very much. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Mariam, so much. That was such a great, the lecture made me a bit guilty about what I'm doing in my lifestyle, but I really like your take-home message of let's build wellness rather than treat disease. Because I believe, the whole lecture series we've been having is all about that and trying to, fix the problem before it becomes a problem and actually treating it. So thank you for that. We'll end tonight, or our last talk, with some questions from the Q&A. Just for time, I won't be reading all the questions, but I will go through some with different ideas. So one question is here, teenagers skip their breakfast most of the time and eat less veggies and fruits. What will be the results if they continue like this? Both Mariam and Dana, both feel free to answer.
I think we can't really say that there's a direct effect that's going to happen. A lot of teenagers or young kids go through a phase where they don't eat much fruits and vegetables. But I think as long as we try to introduce some fruits and vegetables, maybe in different ways. I think a lot of people see vegetables as a salad, or fruits as something to just have on the go. But in fact, you can always create new recipes and try to get them involved. I think that might help. The effect in the long term really depends on the overall diet, I would say. Are they having, fiber from other sources? Is their water intake adequate? Questions like that would probably help us understand, the effect in the long term. But overall, definitely try to motivate them by, introducing new recipes, new meal ideas. Everyone that tells me, I don't eat vegetables, I'm like, you couldn't have tried all the vegetables and all the recipes and not liked anything. There's no way, that there's always something that you might like. Just give it a chance. Maybe, if they're teenagers also, try to get them to understand why it's beneficial. I think, they're not young. They should already be on a journey of understanding nutrition and the importance of eating habits. That it would be beneficial to maybe also get them to understand where you're coming from.
Perfect. Thank you for that answer. One question here. For someone who does 24-hour shifts, I'm guessing at the hospital, what's the best way to plan your meals?
I think, I've worked at various hospitals before, and I know, there's always a place where you can probably store your meals. Keep them refrigerated. Maybe the heating up could be an issue depending on the hospital, but overall you do have have space. But I would definitely say plan in advance. If you're there for 24 hours, at least have a main meal or two and a few snacks on hand. You can then maybe order a third meal if need be. Know what's around you, what kind of restaurants are available. I always, I try to have a few restaurants that I know I like, that I have dishes that I agree with, or that I think are nutritious and healthy. And these are usually my backup restaurants for when I'm on the go and I don't have time to think of, what I would like to eat. Then خلاص, I'm choosing from these options, and I will just have a meal from the restaurants that I know offer me a good menu or a good meal choice.
Thank you for that answer. We have a question from India, and she's saying she's a 23-year-old medical student. And in her final year, she's been suffering from rheumatoid arthritis since 2016. Can you please consult on a proper dietary plan? I know, based on working with Renourish, I probably need a lot more information from her before you can actually come up with anything. But do you recommend anything off the top of your head that's necessary in terms of like specific food items? Shifat Naz, I welcome you to speak to Dana and Maryam directly and possibly have a nutrition plan through Renourish. But I don't know if you can.
To be honest, I'm not aware myself of specific foods that would be beneficial. But maybe try following, like a wholesome diet, and then definitely consult a specialized dietitian and try to work on an individualized plan. Dana, I'm not sure if you know something more specific.
I think with rheumatoid arthritis, it's important to also know what medication she's actually taking at the time. So it's difficult for us to kind of come with a consult or a recommendation without really knowing more about her situation. So I really just advise, if you were able to like catch our email or get it from Osama, you can contact us at any time, and hopefully we'll be able to either help you ourselves or directly you to specialists that are like more aware of your situation.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll do one more question. I know you guys have another engagement you're supposed to be at. So I'll say this one. How can I drink water more often? This person has downloaded an app that reminds them, but they still can't drink more water. Do you have any ideas?
I've been on that journey. I think Dana knows I'm not, the best at drinking water, but maybe she's a better person to answer. But for me, I prefer my water cold, but I'll just have it cold as long as I'm drinking water. I flavor my water sometimes. I think, have a reminder, keep your bottle with you at all times. That should keep you going. Dana, any extra tips?
To be honest, like one of the recommendations I usually give someone is, once you wake up, have a bottle of water, not the small bottle, like at least 500 ml. So right when you wake up, so that at least you've had 500 ml, and that kind of gives you and sets you for the day. The more water you drink early on, it kind of sets you in, and it's also good for your digestion and hydrates you, wakes you up. Another tip that I would kind of recommend is, say, depends on what your activities are, but say you're going to have 200 liters per day. Just have those bottles ready. Have a jug of water measured, ready. So by the end of the day, you should have finished that amount by the end of the day, and you've met your recommended amount. And it differs day by day. We all forget. And sometimes when it's cold, we tend to forget. So if you have it somewhere, sometimes apps or get lost, but find the way that suits you, whether it's through an app or having them physically in front of you. Osama?
Perfect. Yeah. No, I'm just about to type. Your email in the chat. I know because of time we won't be able to answer all the questions. So I'm going to be typing Dana's email now in the chat and Maryam's as well. And if possible, all questions to be directed to email. If that works for you guys, Dana, Maryam.
Yeah, of course.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'll do that. I just don't want to keep you guys up. I know you guys have to be somewhere else. So thank you.
To be honest, it's just it's important especially with the questions. To be honest, I just wanted to I want to answer these questions because I feel bad that people aren't getting their answers. But if I was to go through it very quickly, this is the academic background, so we'll go through it. Blood pressure and salt. So yeah, if you have high blood pressure, you're recommended to have a low salt. So if you have low blood pressure, you're not really recommended to have a lot of salty food just to counteract that. So that's That's what I understood. An interesting one is genes. A lot of research has been done in terms of the influence of genes and obesity. And there is genetic predisposition for obesity. Around 30%, that's what studies have kind of shown, but it's really that genes kind of load the gun, and the environment that we live in triggers it. So you can't just blame genes alone. For body fat, there is a lot of research, a lot of ways for you to measure body fat, either through skin fold thickness, so through calipers, or from bioelectric impedance, or more like advanced ways through the DEXA scan. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get body fat percentage or content. In terms of Mariam, I think we both agree in terms of fish oil and cardiac patients. The data is, as with, like, I think there are a lot of repeated questions in terms of a nutrient and a health, like if it was vitamin D and medical benefits, or I think there was another question in terms of estrogen in males. I think what's important for you to note is dietary assessment and diet nutrition studies are very observational, unless they're done in a randomized controlled trial. And even then, it's just one study. So you can't really confer causation in so many situations, especially when it's observational. One study could show benefits, the other could show adverse health effects. So a lot of research is being done in different nutrients like vitamin D, or say like phytoestrogens in beans and their influence on males and fertility and all those things. But it's not conclusive. So it's really important that if you read some claims, either consult with someone that has a background or do the research yourself. And I think that's kind of, the main ones that were, unless Mariam, you can see some that you want to tackle.
I mean, the osteoporosis question, I think, is like the rheumatoid arthritis, where I would probably advise you to get in touch with a dietitian. When it comes to maybe choosing, I think the full fat lebanon or milk as a better option than the lighter one. It depends on your health goal. If someone has very is overweight and has these items regularly on a daily basis, then it might be a good way to lower caloric intake on a daily basis. However, if someone has them randomly and has no weight issues or any health complications, then I would advise the full fat options. They keep you fuller for longer, they're lower in sugar, and if I were to choose between lowering fat or sugar, I would definitely choose sugar. But that would be my recommendation personally. Yeah, I think that's mostly the question there.
Thank you guys for that. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you again. Yeah.
I need to point something out. In terms of complete protein, it was quinoa and not lentils. So I don't know why.
Okay.
Just in case someone's confused, it was quinoa.
Quinoa. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dana and Mariam, today for a great talk. Again, this is the end, so it's bittersweet for all of us. But definitely we'll have a lot more. There's a lot more for us to do. I think this is just the beginning. Thanks again to Surge Kuwait for being just a powerhouse and very supportive throughout. And I appreciate everyone that's been here at different talks. Our plan is to actually have these talks online in the future, so people can go back and look at them if you missed anything or you want to revisit any of the topics. So thanks to everyone and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. One last thing, this is the QR code. You can follow it to the Surge Kuwait's different accounts. They always post some very interesting stuff, especially for healthcare workers. And definitely we are going to collaborate on more projects like this. So feel free to follow them, Instagram, Spotify, on their websites, through Twitter. and send over any emails if you have anything. They will reach us. Thank you so much.